I knew his voice before I knew his face. And somehow, that made the first moment I saw him feel like cheating on every version of him I had in my head. It was a cold Saturday morning in Chicago, one of those days when the wind didn't just blow, it slapped. I traveled 3 hours by bus just to meet him. Him being a guy who, until that moment, existed only as a voice in my headset, a name glowing in my team lobby, and the steady, unshakable presence that had kept me sane through more nights than I could count. In the game, he was Alpha Roger team's leader, tactician, savior. In real life, he was supposed to be just another gamer friend. Except the second he walked through the cafe door, with that black leather jacket, the way his hair caught the light, and the subtle smirk tugging at his mouth when he spotted me, knew just friends, had been a lie we'd both been telling ourselves. He didn't even hesitate. Eli. His voice was the same low, confident, warm. But now there was a weight to it, like every word carried heat. "That's me?" I managed, trying to stand without looking like my legs had turned to overcooked noodles. The hug happened before I could think. A real one, not the stiff, one-armed bro hug you give acquaintances, but something solid, like he meant it. His jacket was cool from the wind, but underneath, his body was all heat and presence. I had to fight the urge to hold on longer. We slid into a corner booth, our drinks steaming between us. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I was trying not to stare at the way his fingers wrapped around his mug, how they flexed slightly, strong and sure, as if even holding coffee was something he did with purpose. "So," he said, leaning back, eyes narrowing in that way I'd seen in-game whenever he was planning something. "We finally meet. You're shorter than I thought." I snorted. "You're taller. And smugger." He grinned, and it was unfair how much that grin could rearrange my insides. We talked about the game, about mutual friends from the team, about stupid glitches and impossible wins. But there was this undercurrent, a pull between us I couldn't ignore. Every brush of his knee against mine under the table was like a static charge, and every time his gaze lingered too long, I felt my pulse trip over itself. Then his voice softened. "You ever think, what if we'd met sooner? Before the game?" My throat tightened. "Maybe we wouldn't have liked each other." He shook his head slowly. "I think I would have liked you no matter what." The thing is, I knew his life wasn't simple. He'd told me about the strain with his family, how they didn't exactly cheer for his career as a streamer, and how certain parts of himself, parts I was starting to see more clearly, were kept hidden. I wasn't naive enough to think a weekend in Chicago would change that. But the way he was looking at me right then, it was dangerous to hope. The rest of the day passed in a blur of wandering through bookstores, laughing over greasy pizza slices, and stopping every few blocks because one of us had spotted something too ridiculous not to comment on. At one point, we got caught in a sudden burst of snow. Instead of ducking for cover, he tilted his face up to the sky, grinning like a kid. I stood there, watching the flakes catch in his hair, and realized I'd stopped feeling cold. That night, we ended up back at his rented loft, the kind of place with exposed brick walls and dim yellow lighting that made everything feel warmer than it was. He tossed me a blanket and collapsed onto the couch beside me. "You're quieter than usual," he said, nudging my arm. "Just processing." "What?" "That you're real," I admitted, my voice low, "and that I'm sitting here next to you." His expression shifted, less teasing, more intent. He reached out, almost like he was testing the space between us, and when I didn't move away, his hand found mine. "I've wanted this for a long time," he murmured. "Me too." The kiss was hesitant at first, more question than statement, but then it deepened, the kind that makes you forget what air feels like because all you can think about is the heat between you. But reality wasn't going to let us stay in that perfect bubble. The next morning, I woke to the sound of his phone buzzing on the nightstand. He wasn't in bed. I padded out to the kitchen and found him standing by the counter, phone in hand, jaw tight. "Yeah, I know," he was saying into the phone. "No, I'm not coming back early. I told you I have plans." His eyes flicked to me, and something unreadable passed through them. "We'll talk about it later." He hung up, and the silence stretched. "Everything okay?" I asked. He shrugged, but it wasn't casual. "Family stuff. They're not thrilled I'm here." "Because of me?" Pause. Because of who I am when I'm with you. The words hit harder than I expected. I wanted to say something comforting, but all I could think about was how fragile this was, how easily the outside world could crush what we just started. We had one more day together, and we spent it pretending the morning hadn't happened. But I could feel an invisible clock ticking down. When we finally stood on the train platform, my chest felt tight enough to crack. I don't want this to be the end, I told him. It's not, he said quickly, gripping my hand. I don't care how complicated it gets. We'll figure it out. The train's horn blared. People shuffled past us. And then he kissed me quick, fierce, like he was leaving a mark. I stepped onto the train, heart pounding, and watched as he stood there on the platform, hands in his pockets, watching me go. Weeks later, we were back in the game, headsets on, teammates shouting in the background. It should have felt the same as before. But now, every time he said my name, I remembered the way it had sounded in that cafe, in that loft, on that platform. We weren't just teammates anymore. We weren't just voices in each other's ears. We were something messier, riskier, and infinitely more real. And I knew no matter how many miles stretched between us, I'd choose him every time. 2 months passed before I saw him again. 2 months of late-night calls, game matches where our banter slipped into quiet confessions, and messages that made my chest ache. But also 2 months of silence between bursts of connection days when he vanished without explanation. When I wondered if his family had gotten to him, if the world outside our headsets was pulling him away. Then one Friday night, while I was in the middle of a match, he said, "Eli, can you meet me tomorrow? Same cafe. Noon." There was something in his voice that made me shut down the game mid-match without even saying goodbye to the others. The next day, I walked into the cafe to find him already there, fingers wrapped around a mug he wasn't drinking from. His eyes lit up when he saw me, but I could tell something was heavy on him. "Hey," I said, sliding into the booth. "Hey." He took a breath. "I told my family. About me. About us." I froze. "And they didn't take it well. Said I'm throwing away everything for someone I barely know in person." His mouth tightened. "But they're wrong. I know you. I've known you longer than anyone who only sees me in family photos or holiday dinners." I wanted to reach across the table and take his hand, but he beat me to it. His palm was warm, his grip firm like he was anchoring himself. "I'm not walking away, Eli," he said. "Not because it's hard, not because it's messy. I want this. I want you." The words landed somewhere deep inside me, in a place that had been bracing for goodbye since the day we met. We left the cafe and walked through the city, past people wrapped in coats, past shop windows glowing with light. At one corner, snow began to fall, not a storm, just a quiet drift that made the air feel softer. He stopped under a street lamp, the snow catching in his dark hair. "Do you ever think," he said, "that maybe we were always going to end up here? That every match, every late night, was just pushing us toward this?" I stepped closer. "If that's true, I'm glad I didn't miss it." He smiled, slow and certain, and then kissed me right there on the sidewalk, in front of the city and the snow and the street lamp's golden light. No rush this time, just the kind of kiss you give when you know you're exactly where you're meant to be. Later that night, back at my apartment, we sat side by side on my couch with the game menu glowing on the TV. Neither of us picked up the controllers. "You know," he murmured, "we're still undefeated as a team." I grinned. "Guess we should keep that streak going both in-game and out here." He leaned back, one arm resting behind me, pulling me in until I fit against him like I'd been made for that space. "Out here's the one I care about." And for the first time since we'd met, the world outside our little bubble didn't feel like a threat. It felt like something we could take on together. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe to stay updated with the latest videos.